That's absurd. Even if you don't believe in monotheism, if you don't believe in, the God of Christianity, the God of Judaism, the God of Islam, which a lot of people don't, it doesn't matter. We're all equal. We're all humans. We are all the same. It doesn't matter what color you are, what language you speak, whatever. No life is worth more than another. And one of the problems with both the American, God bless America stance and the Israel, we are the chosen people stance is it implies that there are people who are more important than other people, people whose lives matter more than other people. Anytime you hear the Israelis talk about, for every, Israeli killed, we're going to kill 100 Palestinians. Well, you know who did that? The Nazis. For every German soldier who was killed, we're going to hang 100 people. We're going to shoot 100 people. We're going to burn that village. We're going to do. Israel has become that which was trying to destroy it. That's one of the things here. So, getting back to your question, I think we're going to see a lot of desperate acts by a lot of desperate people trying to silence voices that, for the first time in a long time, are starting to resonate. There are people now who aren't afraid. That's the other thing, is people become fearless because it's hard to shut them down. People can now get out there and call out Zionism as the political scourge that it is. And yes, they'll be attacked, but they'll also find a lot of support. And there's people saying, see, the internet has built up this whole anti-Semitic thing. Yes, it has. Yes, it has. There's a whole bunch of communities out there on the internet. There are communities of hate. There are communities of intolerance. There are communities of whatever you want to say it. That's the consequence of free speech, ladies and gentlemen. Free speech means everybody gets to speak. The difference here is that I don't have to embrace that which is put out there. There's the people watching right now, if you don't like what we're saying, Alex, I don't mean to do this to your show, but if you don't like what we're saying, click. Turn it off. Stop watching. You don't have to watch. No one's paying you to watch. You don't have to watch. If you don't like it, get the hell out of here. Alex cares because I care about but the bottom line is I don't care. If you don't like what you're hearing, go find something that you do like. But see, the beauty of it is where there is quality, people tend to gather around, and good ideas beget good listeners and good participants and good audiences. And this is a good audience because you have good guests and you talk about things like that. You can't shut Twitter down because there are voices on Twitter that you disagree with. What you need to do is say, thank God, not only that they get to speak, but I get to speak and to counter them. Because if you're saying you need to shut them down, what you're saying is your voice isn't strong enough to compete against them. I'd like to believe that my voice can compete against any pro-Zionist voice out there. I have an open challenge to anybody that's taken a different point of view on the issue of Israel to debate anytime, any place. You name it, we got it, buddy. But they won't. Piers Morgan, he's out there attacking people. He basically, bans people, blocks them, doesn't want to have that discussion.
Yeah, he has a fallback answer, or the fallback comment all the time. Israel has its right to defend itself. But here's something I want to ask you, Scott, because I get this from a lot of people watching the show. They say, we were at a bar, we were at a restaurant, we were at our uncle's house for the weekend, and somebody brought up the Israel-Palestine, and they're saying, like, is there a way that we can try to engage? And most of it is, I would say, a lot of the people say, well, the Piers Morgan line, well, Israel has its right to defend itself. I think the average person watching this program has probably either been involved in a conversation like that or has been pulled into a conversation like that, and sometimes maybe a bit afraid to answer back. Is there a go-to I don't know. You are a person that I would love to have beside me when I'm sitting in these situations where people just come right at me. And
I'll tell you what I would do in a bar. Come at me at a bar. Israel has the right to exist. I go up to him and I say, give me your keys to your car. Give me your keys or I'm going to break your damn neck. Give me the keys to your car. And I'm taking your car and I'm going to your house, and don't you dare show up. And then when you come up and say, I want my house, I'm going to say, what? You think you have a right to defend yourself? I'm going to kill you because I have a right to defend myself. And you're going to say, but you have no right. You stole my house. I have a right to. I have an inherent right to defend myself. I stole your house, and now you want to come and get it back. I'm going to kill you, but you can't do that. It's my house. I have an inherent right of defense. Welcome to the Israeli argument. They stole the Palestinian land. They stole everything. And then they say, when you dare come back and say, I want it back or I want to challenge you, you can't. I have a right to defend myself. And I have Big Brother America that's giving me the airplanes, the bombs, and everything to do it because we guarantee that Israel has the technological supremacy over any potential enemy. The occupier never has an inherent right of self-defense against the occupied. That is international law. That is what the International Court of Justice decided in 2004 about this very issue. So that's what I would just tell people, that Israel's the occupier, and they have no inherent right of self-defense against anything the occupied do in relation to the actions of the occupier. And then, they can, then I'll just give me your damn house. And don't come near me because I have an inherent right of self-defense and I'll kill you the moment you step across the threshold. No, well, you can't do it. You just said Israel could. Why can't I? Why can't I steal your house and say, get the hell out of here? You just told me Israel has an inherent right of self-defense. They don't. See, if I steal your house and I'm in your house, you have every right to come in and kill me because I stole your house. You're in the right. I'm in the wrong. Israel's in the wrong here, especially Eretz Israel, this political Zionist, infused Israel. I would say this, that the Israel defined by the 48 borders and the 67 borders has a right to exist. And if you're attacking the Israel of 48 and 67, then Israel has an inherent right of self-defense. But what Israel's doing to Gaza right now is not, everybody's like, they got out in 2005. There's a thing called CLA and COGAT. And I just asked people to go and Google it. The Israelis give you a nice, convenient website that explains what it is. The Civilian Liaison Agency, and COGAT is the military arm. They manage everything that happens inside Gaza. Don't tell me that Israel is outside of Gaza. Nothing happens in Gaza unless Israel says it happens. Unless Israel approves it. Nothing goes into Gaza unless Israel says it's approved. If Israel had nothing to do with Gaza, why can't Gaza have a port? Why won't Israel allow shipping in and out of Gaza? Because they can't allow the Palestinians to be in control of their lives. Why don't they have an airport? Why can't Palestinians get a Palestinian passport, go to the Palestinian airport, and fly around the world like we all do? They can't. Why? Israel says they can't.
Scott, let's talk about that.
Gaza. Israel occupies Gaza. Israel controls every aspect of Gaza.
Let's talk about that, because I think the average person doesn't really understand, still to this day, what this occupation means. Let's talk about, if you're a Palestinian today, what are your chances of going to an airport, going for a walk on the beach, leaving, coming back, communicating with loved ones around the world? Internet, no internet. I mean, what rights do they have, if any, Palestinians? And really, the future, they've wiped out, 4,000 or 5,000 children. I mean, isn't this a recipe for an underground movement to say, wait a minute, this is a whole young generation coming up. They've been battered and beaten down, and brothers and sisters have been killed. I mean, Israel really thinks that they're going to get the message through. I mean, isn't this a recipe for disaster?
Well, it is a recipe for disaster. Let's just put it this way. If you're a Palestinian, you have no rights. None. Zero. Now, I know there's going to be lawyers out there say they have an inherent right of being treated like human beings under the... No, they don't. And the proof is what's happening right now. 12,000 have been murdered. Where are their rights? Where are their rights? They don't have any rights. Nobody's going to go to jail for murdering them. 12,000 murders, 4,000 dead children. All those people out there, we care about the kids. We care. You don't give a damn about the kids. If you did, you'd be up in arms, fuming at the mouth, storming the gates. No, you're like, oh, we're hard. They have no rights. None. Zero. No one's doing anything. Now, there's people in the streets, and God bless those people. Please continue to do that. But we all know what happens eventually. The demonstrations, they can't go out there forever because they got to go to work. They got to earn a paycheck. They got to go home. They got to feed the kids. They got to do this. They got to do that. And eventually the demonstrations peter out. The nations that could do something aren't doing anything. This is why, again, China, step up to the plate, do something, be the leader you claim you want to be. It's China's time to shine. It's China now that can take the lead in solving this problem, because America isn't going to. America can't. We've been discredited. We're not impartial. It's time for China to shine. But, you know, the way you shine is that you have to pick a good versus evil. And I think it's time now that we recognize that Israel is on the side of evil right now. China needs to side with the Palestinians in a fair way. But I mean, this is we're at a state right now where if you want to say the Palestinians have rights, then you have to stand up and defend those rights. You have to defend them. There's a whole bunch of French lawyers that have come out and said, we're going to defend you. Well, then do it. I'm glad you came out and said you're going to do it. The proof is in the pudding. I want to see case after case after case after case filed in the International Criminal Court. I want every single Israeli pilot to be indicted. I want every Israeli soldier, every Israeli politician. If you hold an Israeli passport, you need to be indicted for the crime of mass murder, collective punishment. You're all guilty of it. Because you allow it to happen. This maybe the Israeli passport thing was a little bit too much, but but my point is, you have to start standing up and defending Palestinians if they're to have any rights. Because if no one's going to stand up and defend them, then they have no rights. You talk about walking the beach. Really, there's cases where boys went to play on the beach, as boys are wont to do, and the Israeli Navy killed them. Who stood up for their rights? There's a case where mothers are with their children in their home trying to prepare the afternoon meal. Bam, bomb got them. Who stood up for their rights? Don't tell me that the Palestinians have rights. They don't. They have no rights. They don't have the right to live. They don't have the right to breathe. They don't have a right to eat. They don't have a right to travel. They have no rights. They're not even people. They're just statistics. And the proof again is in the numbers. Because one should be too many. One should be too many. But 12,000, because here's the funny thing. Talk to the Americans. I mean, I always love this one when a stupid American diplomat gets out there. 12,000's too many. Well, what's an acceptable number, boy? 12,000's too many. 8,000, that a good number for you? So if you're the Palestinian and you got in the lottery and you pulled number 7,999, you don't count. But if you got lottery number 8,001, your life matters now, because 8,000 is too many. I mean, it's just the dumbest thing in the world for anybody to ever say that 12,000 is too many. One is too many.
Scott, how does China get involved?
Well, how did China get involved with Saudi Arabia and Iran? China is a global power. China has global interests. China's interests seem to be grounded more in stability than trying to impose Chinese will. I mean, the funny thing is China brokered this deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And how many Chinese troops then moved into the Middle East to take over that base that Iran promised them in exchange for this? Or how many Chinese airplanes flew to Saudi Arabia? None. That's my point. China didn't do this to get into the Middle East and take over the Middle East. China did it because they need Iran and Saudi Arabia to trade with them via BRICS, via the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They need that to get the Chinese, economy, the Belts and Roads Initiative and the new Silk Highway to connect with the Middle East, to do this thing that China's really good at, which is promoting global trade and commerce. That's what they need: stability, long-term stability, not short-term, long-term stability. So China is the only nation that is looking for, for instance, if they were to get involved in a solution, and they've been saying they're prepared to do this. It's not like I'm asking China to do something China's been saying for years, we're ready to take the lead on resolving this issue. But their solution isn't going to be in America. See, America can't give you a solution because we're dealing with a Congress that's bought and paid for by Israel. The last time I checked, Israel doesn't own the Chinese government yet. Who knows? Down the road, it may happen. But in the United States, our government is bought and paid for by Israel. They own it. So everything we do is going to be a short-term focus for the short-term benefit of Israel. We're not looking for any long-term solutions. This is why whenever America is involved in a two-state solution discussion, it immediately disappears, because we have to be responsive now to the immediate political needs of an Israeli political class that survives because of America. And so if we're doing something that makes it uncomfortable for them, we have to immediately correct the course in short term. China is long term. China's about economic. Here's the other thing too. Take a look at Gaza. Who's going to rebuild it? Who has the resources to rebuild it? Who has the ability to leverage their global economic clout into rebuilding? The United States can't. Again, we got money, but hell, we're the only way we could rebuild. The only way we could rebuild Gaza is if we sold more bonds to China to raise the money to rebuild Gaza. I mean, that's the ridiculous state of the American economy today. China, on the other hand, again, the Chinese government has to decide what's in its best interest. But one of the things that China can offer, and again, look at how excited Benjamin Netanyahu got about at the General Assembly debate when he was showing the map, not of the Iranian bomb as he used to do, but of the map showing the Middle East, India economic corridor, the India Middle East economic corridor that came up through Haifa connectivity, and he's like, "Oh, Israel's going to be." China can offer that to Israel. China's the only one that can offer that to Israel. China can offer that to Israel. China can offer to rebuild Gaza. China can be the voice of sanity and stability that's premised on the economic well-being of all parties in play. China doesn't care what your domestic politics are. That's the difference between China and America. We come in and tell you how to wipe your nose. China comes in and just says, peace, harmony, what you do inside your borders, your business. But what we need you to do is live in peace and harmony with your neighbors and promote this economic machine to keep this thing going for all parties, for everybody to succeed. It's a different approach in America, which is purely a selfish, security-oriented approach. What's in it for us? What do we get out of this? How do we enhance our military posture in the region with a treaty, with this, with that, and the other thing? I think the Chinese approach is much needed right now. So China brings in a fresh approach with the ability to back up policy objectives with resources, should China decide that that's where the resources go. And I think the Chinese probably would say, if you could get a long-term peace between Palestinians and Israelis, and then Israelis and the Arabs, that might be worth the investment. So we'll see. But I think China brings a whole fresh approach, a truly impartial approach, and one that's much needed, and one that, frankly speaking, isn't owned by Israel, and which will do more than just pay lip service to the Palestinians. Because the Palestinians, everybody talks about Palestine, but they don't mean it. Nobody means it. Nobody supports the Palestinians. Nobody ever has. Maybe China can be that nation that actually steps up and says, when we are out here advocating for Palestine, understand that we are advocating for Palestine and we mean it. That would be nice.
Scott, I mean, there's been some talk about this natural gas find off the shores of Gaza. It's quite a big project. It was brought up in the news years ago, and now again it's starting to come back into the headlines. Gaza's multi-billion-dollar gas field. I don't know if you know much about it or heard much about it, but this could possibly be a Chinese angle, if anything, if you know what I mean. Like,
well, it could be. I mean, there's a giant gas field off the coast, in the Eastern Mediterranean. And it's being divvied up by Egypt, by Cyprus. Turkey's trying to impose its will on that. But in the immediate thing, when you talk about Israel is is competing against two of their neighbors. One is Gaza, which has, if it was a sovereign state, a economic zone that it gets to develop. And it's you draw a line from the border out in the sea, it goes out to a certain distance, and that's their zone, economic exclusivity zone. Israel does the same thing. Israel almost got in a war with Hezbollah because Israel has drawn a line that sort of jotted up to take over part of the Lebanese claim, and Hezbollah went, we exist only to prevent you from stealing Lebanese land, so you're going to have to readjust that line. And guess what Israel did? They readjusted the line. But there's all that gas. It needs to be developed and exploited. One thing that no one's going to do is spend hundreds of billions of dollars to develop this if their investment has a chance of going up literally in flames through a regional war. So China can talk about the kind of stability, and you attach money to it, gas development, etc. People start paying attention. And then B, it's in China's interest, because if you develop it, maybe you want to bring in some Chinese, gas developers, and China can, has an economic. Every nation has a right to pursue its own thing. Who knows? But China, I think that is a player. But right now, for the Palestinians, it's just a faint dream, because Israel will never let it happen, because there is no Gaza, there is no West Bank, there is no Palestine, there's only Israel. So we need to change that reality. We need to make a Palestine that can advocate for its own economic interests and negotiate with whomever they want to negotiate to develop its resources. And China could be a player in that.
I really think that China is actually one of the only players that can rebuild an infrastructure on nations that have been torn apart. I mean, let's pivot over to Ukraine right now. I've asked this question a few times, and you've answered it in detail on the show many times. Is that land that people have been fighting over, where everyone's at a standstill on the Russian side and the Ukraine side, and bombs going back and forth? I mean, it's torched land, it's mined land. I mean, is China one of the only nations that can rebuild something like this? Because we are talking, huge amounts of land. I mean, I saw an interview the other day where they were in the old steel factory, walking through there and seeing that just completely bombed out. And the guys that were walking through, Lancaster and another guy running a channel there, said, this could be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I mean, it's just in a plant to rebuild it. So is China, and I think you're onto something here, is China one of the only nations that can really rebuild these nations that have been absolutely flattened by war?
Well, let's be clear that Russia will rebuild Russia. And they're not, I mean, I can't speak for the Russian government, but I take a look at what they've talked about, the priorities set forth by President Putin regarding the 4 new territories and Crimea. And he said that, rebuilding the economic and social infrastructure of these places, bringing it up to Russian standards, is the top priority of his government. Now, if this conflict continues to a point where Russia assumes control over, some Russian leaders, Medvedev and others have insinuated that, Russia will probably take 5 more oblasts, 5 more territories. That's almost half of Ukraine. But Russia will assume responsibility for that. I think where China comes in is, in addition to being a economic partner with Russia, because by being a good partner with Russia, you empower the Russian economy to the point where it can feasibly divert billions of dollars worth of resources to rebuild these new territories. But Russia's not going to rebuild Ukraine per se. At least it won't be their top priority. And the West is abandoning Ukraine like a bad habit. Plus, Ukraine, I believe, whatever exists, will be under a period of Russian domination where denazification is a reality, and the West isn't going to invest into that. China might. China, might be willing to go in and and extend the Belts and Roads Initiative into Ukraine. And I think Russia might be inclined to let them happen, because the last thing Russia needs is a Ukrainian cancer festering on its borders. Mm-hmm. When this war ends, Ukraine needs to be brought back into being a functional, nation based upon logic. And China could be of assistance there, I believe. Again, I can't speak on behalf of Chinese politicians and what their priorities are, but again, I think they also agree that Ukraine can't be this infected mass just putrefying on the flank of Russia, that Ukraine will have to be healed. And China could play a role in that if China wanted to. As I said, I think Ukraine is going to be abandoned by the West, and it's not going to be Russia's top priority. Russia's top priority is Russia. But I don't think Russia would impede a nation like China, a friendly nation, coming in and helping rebuild Ukraine, so that as Russia rebuilds, Ukraine rebuilds, and at some point in time, you'll have 2 healthy nations that will have to figure out how to live in peace and harmony with each other.
I have a comment up on the screen here. U.S. wins in Argentina, the recent elections. Have you got any comments on that?
Well, it's definitely goes against the trend of what was happening. You saw what I'm interested in is what's Argentina's status with BRICS going forward, because they were one of the nations that signed on to join BRICS, and they're supposed to be brought in early next year. But a key aspect of BRICS is de-dollarization, and the new Argentinian president said no, he wants to re-dollarize the Argentine economy, and he's going down a path that runs counter to all of his neighbors and all of the global South. So, he will definitely be an outlier. Argentina will be an outlier. And now the question is America the economic ally that Argentina can rely upon? And all I would caution the Argentinians is that you're not the 51st state. You can wave the American flag as much as you want to. You can say all nice things about America all you want. Thank you very much. But you're not the 51st state, and you are so low on our list of priorities, it's not even funny. We got a whole bunch of things we got to do here at home. They're fighting over money for Ukraine and Israel. And I don't know what you think America's going to do, because the one thing we will do is punch you over to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And history shows that once they get their grips on an economy like Argentina, the conditions that they put on this money are very strict and very demanding, and the population just simply isn't going to put up with it. And I think that this president's not going to be around for very long.
That's interesting. I saw another comment the other day where people were saying, of countries in the European Union, where people were, really complaining. The Poles were saying, we'll let in certain refugees in the country, but we won't let other refugees. And somebody made a comment, well, when your country becomes destabilized, where are you going to run to? And it's quite interesting that, we have a lot of these countries that stand up and they, I'll use Canada for an example here. We've accepted a lot of refugees over the last couple of decades. But, when we get into trouble financially, where we can't house the people or find jobs. Now, over the last 20 years, the economy has been relatively solid, except 2008. When this economy war, blow up, I would say, it's going to really put the focus on how strong these governments are that can hold on to this. I mean, we are seeing, as you said before, millions of Ukrainians that have gone throughout Europe. It's a generation that won't be learning their own mother tongue language. They'll be learning a language of, Scandinavian language. Some of them might be learning Lithuanian, Latvian, Estonian. I mean, they're all over the place. And my issue here is that I feel that this has the potential, if we continue to see, countries destabilize other countries like they did in Venezuela. Argentina could be next. Colombia could be next. I mean, the dam is going to burst on some of these countries, isn't it, Scott? Where they're not going to be able to handle the influx, and their own countries are going to be at risk. Are they not?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're dealing with a world where population is growing maybe faster than the world can adjust. And what I mean by that is that we're going to run into resource issues: water, food, energy, water. And the interesting thing about water is without it, you die. Without it, you die. And there's a whole bunch of areas in the world that have increasing populations and decreasing water tables, water supply. And they don't have the resources for desalination or things of that nature. And once you get populations moving, and you see this, for instance, in West Africa, we sit there and we look at the fighting going on.
Breviloquent, both on your part and Blind Jim's.
Breviloquent.
Paul Spencer, who's near Portland, Oregon. Near Portland. Chechnya is building 100+ homes for Gazan refugees. There are over 1,000 of these folks there now. Could or should the Russian Federation invite Gazans to build a new country of sorts in some southern part of the RF, near Kazakhstan, for instance?
I mean, before Russia does that, I think people should ask the Palestinians if that's what they want. This is sort of modeled on, the early Zionist activities of the the Jews who were looking at homelands. I think they were looking in Africa and Uganda for a homeland, and the idea was just anywhere you could get a homeland, you could get a homeland. But they chose the Holy Land because there's biblical links there. The Palestinians, why would they want to live anywhere but Palestine? I mean, that's their homeland; it's theirs. I don't think the Palestinians would agree to a false state, a fake state, a new state that doesn't have any historical relevance.
All right, our first internet outage. And we'll see if we can get Scott back. As I said before, we do have a plan. If
so, but I'm back.
Okay.
I don't think that I don't think the Palestinians would go for it. I commend Chechnya for its for what it's doing for Palestinian refugees, but I think the status will be refugee status, which means at some point in time these people will hopefully be returned to their homeland and able to build homes in Palestine.
All right, keep that phone number handy just in case, Scott. Jasmine from the great state of Michigan. I think that's where Blind Jim is also, right? You have previously said that the U.S. will always remain faithful to Israel because of the Israeli lobby. But ever since the genocide in Gaza started, you can see the opinions change, especially among the young generation. So do you think the days of the Israeli lobby and Zionism are numbered?
I'd like to hope so. I'd like to believe so. And I would like, I want it to be that way. But the reality is, Israeli money runs deep. The corruption of the American political system at the hands of the Zionists, of the Israelis, is real. They brag about it, openly brag about it. They're going to spend $100 million to influence the 2024 election. Imagine if Russia just came out and said, "Hey, we're going to spend $100 million to influence the American election." Think anybody would stand for that? Of course not. But Israel's bragging about it. They openly lobby Congress. They threaten congressional members with being primaried. Imagine again if Russia came in and said, "Hey, if you don't support this, that, and the other thing, we're going to put money in the system and run somebody against you." Nobody would think that candidate would be legitimate. We'd say that's a Russian candidate. Well, guess what? Most of the candidates that run for Congress are Israeli candidates because they're bought and paid for by the state of Israel. And as long as that's the case, until you purge Congress of this Israeli taint, so to speak, I think that the lobby is always going to have that power and the influence. I'd like to believe that we could find a way to limit it, but I'm not optimistic.
What do you make of South Africa going before the UN court accusing Israel of genocide?
I think it's wonderful. I'm glad South Africa had the moral courage and integrity to do so. There's no doubt in anybody's mind that Israel is a genocidal state. What they're doing against the Palestinians readily qualifies as genocide, and it's wonderful that South Africa has taken this case to the court. The court is hearing the case. 84 pages of unequivocal truth, fact-based truth. In many cases, using the Israeli government's own words against them. You don't have to manufacture a case here. You don't have to use circumstantial evidence. The Israelis have right out, just Israeli officials have said it. There's the soldiers say it. The commanders say it. It's genocide, and I'd like to believe that the court will find Israel culpable in committing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza.
All right, let's go on to our next question. This is from A Witness in Canada. Did Bernie Sanders just grow a spine by putting forth a resolution to find out if U.S. weapons were misused or not? Or is it a frantic move to distance the U.S. from the coming genocide conviction of Israel for their massacre in Gaza? Bernie Sanders growing a spine? Do you know about this?
No, I mean, I'm hearing about it, but I'll take a witness at face value here that that Sanders did this. I don't think he did it because he's trying to do the right thing. He has long been an ardent supporter of Israel. I think he's doing it for political cover. At some point in time, Joe Biden and the Democratic Party is going to have to distance itself from the atrocities being committed by Israel. And what Bernie Sanders has done, even though he's technically an independent, he caucuses with the Democrats. And I think that what he's done here is create the beginnings of a political cover of as you call it, Jeff, a plan B for the United States when it's time to cut and run from Ukraine because it's a sinking ship and we don't want to go down with that sinking ship.
All right, let's take another phone call.
Because it's a sinking ship.
Turn down your computer. What's your question?
Okay, well,
Turn it down.
Привет.
You can do
Hello.
it. You can do it. All right, what's your question?
Привет. Привет. Добрый день. Как дела? Scott Ritter for
Hello.
president.
Scott Ritter for president. Okay. Is that it? Is
I
that
want
your
to toss that. I think it's a realistic goal to get Scott Ritter elected president in 2028. I just want to toss that out.
Okay.
But Mr. Ritter, you have inspired me to study and learn Russian and to begin to read Pushkin and the other great Russian authors. I'm 64 years old, but I'm going to be doing that for the rest of my life. I'd just like to ask you, have you read all of Pushkin? What do you think are his important poems? I gather that Eugene Onegin, is that like the central work where where you get the ideas about the Russian soul? And just any other comments you'd have about Pushkin?
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks
that's
for
my
your
question.
call. Thanks for your call. You can listen to President Ritter address that question on your computer. Thank you. Go ahead, President.
Well, I want to commend you for learning the Russian language and familiarizing yourself with the great Russian authors, and of course, Alexander Pushkin is one of the greatest. Eugene Onegin, of course, as you said. I mean, you know the answer. It is a poem that many people say best describes the Russian soul. I'm lately been reading up on the Bronze Horseman, another epic poem written by Pushkin about the statue to Peter the Great in St. Petersburg. Because if you look at the prologue, it talks about it sort of mocks the Finns and the Swedes. And Peter the Great is building this city, St. Petersburg, in order to protect Russia from these two threats. And when you look at today with Finland having joined NATO, Sweden on the cusp of entering NATO, it just seems to be relevant and to get Pushkin's insight into the thinking behind the building of the city is, again, I just think there's a lot of important parallels today. But no, you're doing very good. I applaud
Do you think
you.
this guy could possibly be the U.S. ambassador to Russia in the Ritter administration?
Well, he could be the U.S. ambassador to Russia in somebody else's administration. I can tell you that not only the likelihood of me running, but the chances of me being elected are slim to none. So I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I'll keep doing what I'm doing. I think I do a better job as a citizen ambassador than I would do as a failed presidential candidate.
All right. Well, a 64-year-old guy can dream, can he? For crying out loud. Give him something to live for. Kiki, who claims to be your biggest fan, I don't know about that. How do we measure that? She's, you know what? I think I forgot to change near Portland, Oregon. So disregard that. But anyway, you have said before that Israel is not our ally. Then why does the U.S. staunchly continue to support them, even during times of genocide? There's that G word again. I've been told they give us a foothold in the Middle East. Is this true? If not, then what do they do for us?
They bought us. They own us. I mean, you can listen to Alan Dershowitz. He gave a speech the other day where he, talks about the Jewish influence in America, and he doesn't, hide from it. He basically says that, the Jewish people who constitute, a small percentage of the American population dominate, and that they don't need to apologize about it. He brags about how the American Jews are harder working, smarter. They've applied themselves better, and they deserve the right to have this influence. And they not only deserve the right, but they have to have this right in order to, basically get America on board to, the Israeli bandwagon, so to speak. So, but when I say that Israel's not our ally, Israel uses the United States. We're a tool for Israel. So, we're being fooled or lulled into a false sense of complacency into believing that we have somehow a foothold in the Middle East and Israel. Israel doesn't want to give us a foothold in the Middle East. Israel just wants our money. Israel wants the political backing, the veto in the Security Council, etc. But Israel, doesn't want to open up its defense, its national defense, to the vulnerabilities that come with a genuine alliance with America. Plus, Israel spied on us. Who do you think Jonathan Pollard is? Do the research. Man who spied on the United States in the 1980s, took what we called the crown jewels of the intelligence business. The book that lists all of the frequencies that we monitor using our signal intelligence capabilities. And if you know that we're listening to you, if you know that we've broken a code, then you'll change the systems, and the money that we spent in, getting into the position where we could listen to that particular communication is wasted money. Jonathan Pollard sold this to the Israelis, and then the Israelis in turn bartered it to the Soviet Union to get more Jews out of Israel. So Israel uses America. They killed American sailors. They attacked the USS Liberty, a flagrant attack, killed American sailors, wounded American sailors, never really apologized for it. Israel continues to spy on us. We saw the AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, back in the late 1990s, was a front for spies. They were liaisoning with the Pentagon officials, and some of the Pentagon officials were giving AIPAC classified information about Iran's nuclear missile program, and then the AIPAC people gave that information to Israel. It's spying, literally spying. So no, Israel's not our ally. I think that there's a lot of propaganda that goes into defining Israel's relation with the United States. Both Israel and the American Jews like to make it out as Israel's our greatest ally, that it's literally the 51st state. But the reality is Israel is one of the worst enemies America's ever had, because they've done more harm to America than many of our acknowledged enemies.
All right, let's take a voicemail message, or play a voicemail message from an anonymous caller.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for answering our questions while traveling through Russia. Now, to my question, I can understand the importance of Mykolaiv to secure Odessa once taken by the Russian army. so that Ukraine does not pose danger to the Russian Navy around Crimea. But can you explain the strategic importance of the further northeast oblasts, Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkiv? Also, does the Ben Gurion project play a role in the recent Israeli incursion into Gaza? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the question. I'll start with the Ben Gurion project. Basically, the Ben Gurion project is the idea that Israel is going to not be held hostage to the Suez Canal, and so they would build their own canal connecting the port of Eilat with the Mediterranean Sea. The plan envisioned extensive use of atomic demolition munitions to basically carve this canal out of the desert. It's a plan that has no chance of succeeding because no one's going to allow that many nuclear weapons to be detonated underground or to create these things. So I don't think the Ben Gurion project had anything to do with it because it's not an active, viable project, at least to the best of my knowledge. So that, the thing is, when you speak of Odessa, and I continue to believe that Odessa will be taken by the Russians as part of their demands when this conflict ends with Ukraine. Vladimir Putin recently has come out and said that Odessa is a Russian city, and he's a man who's very careful with his words. So I'll take him at face value that Russia plans on taking it. And as the gentleman caller mentioned, to take Odessa, you have to go through Mykolaiv, and so they're going to have to take Mykolaiv as well. But now when you look at those two goals and objectives,
new co-host Yelena, so thanks for all your hard work. We appreciate it. Stay in touch.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
All right.
But I'm fired.
All right. Well, Scott, you missed the coin giveaway. We put the time to good use so that people would have
Who
something
won?
interesting. Well, it was kind of an odd name that I can't really remember. You know how people always have these weird handles on YouTube and so forth? Or maybe it wasn't even a weird one. Maybe it was just a foreign name, but I don't know. Bacham, something or other? Whatever.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. All right. So let's see. You want to do a couple more questions? Where are we here now? We're still within the hour window. Okay. Let's see where we left off. Claudia Pineda in Ottawa, Canada. According to an article in the Times of Israel, Israel knows the exact location of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. However, according to the article, Sinwar has surrounded himself with a large number of Israeli hostages, which is preventing the IDF from carrying out a strike on him. Do you believe these statements?
No, I don't believe these statements. I think if they knew where he was, they'd kill him. And, the Israelis showed a callous indifference to the fate of Israeli citizens, both those who were taken prisoner by Hamas on October 7th and those who were simply caught in the crossfire. It's becoming apparent that Israel killed the vast majority of the Israelis who died on October 7th. That the Hannibal Directive, which is the name of a controversial directive that has Israel killing soldiers or hostages before they could be taken back into Gaza to prevent Hamas from using them as leverage to get Palestinian prisoners released, that the Hannibal Directive was in full force. So, no, I don't believe this. So I think if they knew where he was, they'd kill him.
All right, Scott, we'll take you any way we can get you with technical problems. But if you are able to steady your phone, we're hearing the rustling around a little bit. Are you able to steady it or not? Should we just continue?
Well, I'm holding it by hand because
Okay.
I think the problems was that my little stick gig cut off my internet connection by putting pressure on my phone in some way that it shouldn't have. So rather than repeat it,
then we'll just live with it. we'll just live with it then. Just
Okay.
asking. All right. Ramsey from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Is the West experiencing a weapons shortage that could affect Israel's military capability? The U.S. bypassed Congress again to approve another arms sale to Israel consisting mainly of 155 millimeter shells. However, it seems those shells will be given to Israel unassembled. Is this how shells are normally exchanged?
I'm not somebody who has been involved in the transfer of weapons from the United States to other nations. I will say this, that when I inspected in Iraq, um, the weapons depots of the Iraqis, they had a tremendous amount of American-made ammunition, much of it which was sourced from Jordan, um, uh, because Iraq had some American-made, artillery systems, and the Jordanians were providing them with ammunition, and the ammunition, 155 millimeter ammunition, was stored ready to fire. So I would assume that that's the way that the ammunition is normally delivered, and that uh, the fact that we're shipping them unassembled 155 millimeter shells is just indicative of the urgency of Israel's need, and our again, I don't know the niceties of law. Maybe by shipping them unassembled, they don't qualify as a weapon, but weapons components, and that might play some role in justifying the bypassing of. I don't know, but I don't think that's the way shells are normally shipped.
You know, I can relate to this, Scott, because I need to get a table, a desk for my apartment. And, Amazon has the best deals, but in almost every case, it comes unassembled. I have to assemble it. That is a burden, so I can relate. Brenda in the UK, how protected are the Palestinian burial grounds from the Israel bombings?
They're not protected at all. Israel's taking bulldozers in and desecrating the burial grounds. There's no protection at all. This is part of the genocide. Genocide isn't just the killing of human beings. Genocide is the eradication of culture, of history, of the people as a whole, and that's what Israel's doing. So no, there's no protection at all. Israel is a despicable nation at this point in time because they're doing things that no civilized nation would tolerate. There's a book written called Alpha, and it's about a Navy SEAL, last name Eddie Gallagher, I think his name, Eddie Gallagher. He was a sniper in Iraq, assisting in the fight against ISIS, and the man was just a brutal thug. He would go up and shoot Iraqi school children, and then call them ISIS kills, but he was turned in by his fellow SEALs. The trial was a travesty. But what I'm saying is that when a Navy SEAL murdered Iraqi children, the system didn't embrace it, applaud it, give him a medal. The Israelis, they're on video right now. They killed a Palestinian mother who was holding the hand of her son. Both were waving white flags as they were trying to move out of a danger zone, and the Israeli sniper shot and killed her. He knew, looking through the scope, that she was a non-combatant. She was waving a white flag. She was holding the hand of a child, and he shot and murdered her. Nothing sacred. The Israelis have become the worst people on the planet.
Here is a question left by voicemail about the Jewish homeland.
Hi, Scott. This is Sean, Canada Strike Canada. I have a question about your notions of the Jewish homeland. You're of the opinion that Israel has the right to exist. That's absolutely fair. You're also of the view that the Jews deserve a homeland, and that history has shown that that should be the case. Now, is this not contradictory to your belief against a supremacist ideology, whether it be in a state or otherwise. That is to say, does a Jewish homeland by itself not necessitate a supremacist nation state or country in which Jews are above all else? And forgive
A
me, this
fair
is,
question.
I mean, no
Uh,
disrespect whatsoever. I actually very much respect your work. I just thought I'd pick your mind on this because I didn't understand it. Thank you and continue your good work. Shout out to Jeff.
Thank you for your question. I will answer it this way. I think we had Eva Bartlett on a while back, and Eva corrected me. I kept talking about a two-state solution as I thought that was the most viable thing, and she said there can't be a two-state solution. And you know, I respect her. She's a woman of great experience. And the more I've studied it, because I admitted, at that time that, I hadn't been a student of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I was late to the game, so to speak, and so there is a lot of evolving thought process going on. And today, I'm of mind that there can't be a two-state solution for exactly some of the reasons that you outlined. That it empowers Israel to be an exclusive, Jewish-only, supreme land. That's not the case. So I agree with you. I think right now that Israel has shown that it has behaved abysmally. I believe now in a one-state solution that can incorporate the notion of Jews living in their historical homeland, but not in a Jewish-only state. And it would have to be peacefully coexisting with other Palestinian citizens, Muslims, Christians, the people of Palestine who have as much of a religious right to live in these lands as the Jews do.
All right, let's take one more question, then let Scott go Betty by. This is from Democracy Brewing in California. I keep hearing that Israel has killed as many women and children in 2 months as Russia has killed in 21 months. Is that true? Has Russia killed 15,000 women and children in Ukraine?
I don't believe Russia has killed 15,000 women and children in Ukraine. So I think that that's a false narrative. Russia, there have been Ukrainians that have died. The United Nations has tracked these numbers, but Russia's been assiduous in their targeting. They don't commit the kind of flagrant violations of international law that Israel commits on a daily basis. If Russia does target a civilian target, I think it's by error as opposed to being a deliberate act. The Washington Post, Human Rights Watch, and others organizations have said straight up that Ukraine uses its own civilians as human shields, that they put military equipment around occupied apartments, they put it around hospitals, they put it around protected areas. And in doing so, they are committing a war crime because you're not allowed to use protected persons or protected facilities, for military purposes. So, what I'll do is I'll go back and research that number just to see where it came from, because it's a very specific number. But I have a feeling that that number might be the total number of civilian casualties in Ukraine, and that the vast majority of those will be men, not women and children. But I'll go and take a look at it myself.
All right. It's very unlikely we'll have another episode before the 19th. Consider it to be a surprise if it does happen. But the next scheduled episode is on January 19th at 12 o'clock noon. And you're going to be pretty busy in the next few days. You want to give people an idea of what's in store, or you want to wait for the recap on the 19th?
I think we have to wait for the recap on the 19th because a lot of what's being planned is still up in the air, and I don't want to telegraph it.
Okay. And then do you want to say when you're coming back, or is that being too specific?
Well, I'll be back in Moscow. No, I've been very specific. I'll be back in Moscow on the 17th, late, and we'll be working on the 18th and 19th. And the 19th, we have our scheduled, program. And at that time, we'll be able to, discuss what I've done over the course of the coming.
All right, but I meant back.
Enough to think that they can't be rational and they have to keep fighting till the last man is no longer standing.
Well, even the Azov Battalion, or they've renamed themselves, these right-wing Banderist Nazis, have said, we've lost the war. We can't. Our offensive is over. We need weapons. We don't have weapons. We can't win. And so I believe they're in survival mode too, which means that they will want to bring an end to this conflict in a way that allows them to retain a modicum of political relevance in any post-conflict Ukraine. Russia, of course, won't want that. Russia wants to denazify. But that's something, for instance, if you take a look at the negotiated settlement that Russia agreed to back in March that would have brought an end to this war, there was no denazification. And maybe if the Ukrainian government stopped now and sought to terminate this conflict on terms favorable to Russia in terms of recognition of the Russian territorial acquisition, that Russia may agree to some sort of post-conflict environment that gives Ukraine a say in how they structure their government, as long as they don't say we want to be members of NATO, and allow Ukraine to solve that problem. But the longer this conflict goes on, the more likely is that Russia is going to impose a solution as opposed to accept a solution put forward by the Ukrainians.
What is your take of the murder by booby trap of General Zaluzhny's chief of staff? I mean, is that the way the Russians operate, or is this somebody inside the military sending a message to the general, or is it some personal feud?
Well, we don't know. I mean, first of all, it wasn't the Russians. We know that. We know that the package was delivered by somebody in Zelensky's, military advisory, in a military advisory to Zelensky. We know who sent the package. The question is, why did it contain live grenades? And why was the general allowing his son to play with the grenade? And why did the general take the grenade and pull the pin on it? I think he might have thought it was a toy. I don't know. It's an insane thing. But the notion is something's not right. Again, we are looking at a system in collapse. We are looking at a system that doesn't know which way they want to go, because there is no direction. They've lost. There's literally nothing that can be done to salvage this situation. There's still some fight left in the Ukrainian army. Don't get me wrong. But they're not going to change the outcome. The Russians have the strategic initiative, and Russia will continue to push. And as they push, you're going to see collapse. I don't know what happened in the final days of Nazi Germany as the walls are coming down in Berlin, but I would imagine there were situations where German generals were drunk and doing stupid things with hand grenades and blowing themselves up because they've just given up on, normalcy of life. These military guys are under tremendous pressure. They've lost a war. And for a military leader who has put their entire reputation on winning a war, remember Zelensky this time last year gave an interview to The Economist magazine, Zaluzhny, where he said, I can beat these guys. I can beat these guys if you just give me, and he put out a shopping list. He got everything on that shopping list and more. He didn't beat them. He barely made a dent in their defenses. He's been defeated, and now he's admitting that defeat. This is a heavy burden.
This may be a political or even a psychological question. What becomes of people like Victoria Nuland and Lindsey Graham when the inevitable is thrust upon them? There is no off ramp in which they can claim that they were right all along.
Well, they'll claim political failure on the part of Biden and others. They will never blame themselves. Look, what happened to Graham? Graham, was the guy screaming for the ouster of Bashar al-Assad. That didn't go too well. Graham was saying we have to stay in Afghanistan. That didn't go too well. And Graham right now is been pushing for this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It's going to fail. He's going to lose. And he's also probably going to lose in the position he's taken vis-a-vis Israel. But Graham is one of these slimy political lizards who always finds a way to land on his feet and scurry out of harm's way and blame other people. But no, nothing's going to happen to them. They're political. They are swamp animals of the swamp. They thrive in the swamp. there's no accountability in the swamp. They'll just be wrong again.
How did Hamas come about, and what role, if any, did Netanyahu personally play?
Well, Hamas is an outgrowth of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a Sunni fundamentalist organization, Egyptian-based, that found root in Gaza, given the connectivity between Egypt and Gaza, and they became a terrorist organization, a resistance organization. Israel decided to help turn them into a political organization capable of governing, the goal of which was to create a counter to the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO and Fatah, their military wing, to split the Palestinian voice around 2005, 2006, when there was talk about statehood, about getting the settlements out. They needed to split and weaken the Palestinians. The Israelis helped fund Hamas back in the 80s. They helped create Hamas politically in 2000. So, and Netanyahu was involved, especially in the second part. He's the one that said, we need to fund Hamas. He's on record saying it. They have his voice. He's given an interview where he says, we need to create Hamas. We need to fund it. We need to breathe life into it. Hamas is a legitimate expression of a fundamentalist, resistance from within Gaza, but its creation was facilitated by Israel and in many ways guided indirectly by Israel.
In order to divide the Palestinians, in order to resist Yasser Arafat and Fatah.
Yes, but the irony is that Hamas was always meant to be the junior partner. When they first had elections in 2006, Hamas won the most votes. They won the parliament, and the PLO couldn't handle that, so they dissolved the parliament. The Israelis were freaking out, going, "No, we didn't want them to win. We just want them to be there." Today, if there were elections, Hamas would win everything. They would win the parliament. They would win the presidency. They are more popular than anybody in the Palestinian Authority right now because they have done more to defend Palestine and to create the conditions that could lead to the creation of a Palestinian state than the Palestinian Authority has ever done.
What is Netanyahu's goal in Gaza today?
Well, he doesn't know even what his goal is. I mean, he's articulated very, decisive goals, the destruction of Hamas, the destruction of the Hamas military. But how do you destroy a military that's underground when you're operating above ground? They don't even have a battle plan how they're going to make that transition. And there's heavy fighting going on. We're not getting the full extent. The Israelis are very, very controlling of who they let in and the conditions under which images are released. CNN put a crew in recently, and they said everything we are showing you was approved in advance by the Israelis, and they only got to go to a limited area. Hamas is releasing videos that show, they are closing with and destroying the enemy through firepower and maneuver. They are, bringing in rocket-propelled grenades, hitting Israeli tanks. Last night, they claimed to have killed 10. They have video evidence to show that 10 were hit. Whether or not they were killed is another question. But this war is not going well for Israel. It's one thing to move tanks in and occupy a particular piece of ground, but when the enemy is like ants underneath you and swarm out and bite you, it's going to be a death by 1,000 cuts. Netanyahu doesn't have a master plan. Remember, they didn't prepare for this. There was no contingency. Israel never imagined Hamas doing what they did on October 7th. Never imagined it. All of their military contingency was for terrorist-like operations or civil unrest. They never thought this would be the kind of operation that required 300,000 troops to be diverted. They always planned on Hezbollah causing problems up north, but never Hamas causing this kind of problem down south.
Netanyahu just told ABC News that Israel would provide security within Gaza once the war is over, meaning prison guards for this open air concentration camp. But isn't that suicidal? Wouldn't that lead to perpetual guerrilla warfare?
I think we have to understand that Netanyahu is a failed politician and his time is limited. He presided over the greatest security failure of Israel in its history. His generals have acknowledged this. They've all said that once the fighting's done, they're resigning. Netanyahu is going to be pushed out. Israel, before October 7th, was already in a near civil war. That's not me. That's the president of Israel saying that there's going to be a civil war because of Netanyahu. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis were protesting the streets against Netanyahu. And now he's being blamed by many Israelis, rightfully so, for this crisis, for the deaths of so many people on October 7th. So Benjamin Netanyahu's out there, spinning plans and making statements. He's not going to be here much longer. He's a failed politician with no credibility. He will be replaced. So I would not pay too much attention to what Netanyahu is saying. I'd wait to see what comes after Netanyahu.
Is there any Western country that accepts the Israeli concept of collective punishment? I mean, isn't that by definition, a war crime?
Yes, it is by definition a war crime. Is there any country that accepts it? The United States, most of Europe, most of NATO. You don't hear them, condemning this. They all speak out in support of Israel. The United States of America supports this ongoing war crime. But it's not as though we just discovered it on October 7th. The basic principle of collective punishment came out of a 2006 doctrine, the Dahiyah doctrine. Dahiyah is a suburb of West Beirut that was leveled by the Israelis as part of their collective punishment of the Lebanese people because Hezbollah was embarrassing the Israeli army during that short 33-day war in August of 2006. So they collectively punished the Lebanese people. Since 2008, Israel's been doing this, 2008, 2010, 2014, 2018, 2020, 2021, collectively punishing the people of Gaza. In 2023, the only reason why it's getting noticed is because Hamas started this off by embarrassing Israel. Everybody's attention now was on Israel, the embarrassment, and Israel's overreacted. The level of destruction is beyond that which is imaginable and tolerable, except in the United States. We still have John Kirby and others spinning the data, spinning the news in a way that absolves Israel of responsibility. But as the Russians pointed out in the United Nations, people keep saying Israel has an inherent right to self-defense. The occupier never has a right of self-defense against the occupied. And Israel is an occupying power over the Palestinian people. So they're committing war crimes in everything they do when it comes to the Palestinian people.
Most of the weaponry that Israel is using was derived from the United States, either by cash or by actual delivery of arms. Is the United States arguably supporting war crimes, engaged in war crimes by the Israeli Defense Force using American military equipment?
If we had a world where the United States could be held accountable for its actions, we don't live in such a world. But if we did, the United States is complicit in every single crime carried out by the Israelis. We've provided them with the aircraft, and we have not done anything to intervene to tell them to stop using those aircraft. We gave them the 2,000-pound JDAM bombs that they used to drop the Gazan infrastructure. The first time one of those bombs hit a civilian structure should have been the last time, because if this was the way the U.S. should be operating, somebody should have picked up the phone and told the Israelis, the next bomb you drop is the last penny you get from us. We want all our weapons returned. We refuse to allow you to go forward in this way. But instead, we let them drop. We send them more bombs. We are flooding Israeli airspace with C-17 transport aircraft, providing the weapons they need to slaughter the Palestinians. We are the war criminals.
Is there any justification for this other than domestic American politics?
None whatsoever, because even if you want to cite regional security, even if you want to say that it's in our national security interests, I'm here to tell you right now, the best ending you get for the United States and Israel is the immediate termination of this conflict. The longer this conflict goes on, the more isolated Israel becomes, and the more of a geopolitical impediment Israel becomes to the United States. Israel is harming the United States right now. As we speak, the global South, which we need to engage with to compete with China on the global stage economically, the global South is abandoning Israel and abandoning us. We are becoming more isolated. This is a significant problem for the United States, especially when we talk about this transition from a rules-based international order into some sort of multipolarity that China and Russia will have a significant say in. If we continue to support Israel, we will be totally isolated, and we will have basically divorced ourselves from a process we must be engaged in if we plan to succeed.
Here is an interview with the number 2 person in Hezbollah. It's very brief. There's a translation as well as subtitles, and it's right to the point.
Right now, Hezbollah is simply trying to distract the Israelis from their military action in Gaza. That's your main goal?
Of course, Hezbollah participates for the sake of lowering the pressure on Gaza and for the sake of preventing Israel from achieving its objectives. In addition, as a clear message that if you expanded, there will be serious consequences. These messages have been delivered and are still being delivered.
How powerful militarily is Hezbollah?
Hezbollah is the only Arab force that's beaten the Israelis in a stand-up fight up until October 7th, when Hamas beat the Israelis in a stand-up fight. Hezbollah is extraordinarily powerful, 50 to 80,000 active duty forces, combat hardened after years of experience in Syria. They can mobilize another 100,000. These are well-trained, well-equipped troops. The bottom line is if they began to fight Israel in the northern front, they could probably defeat the Israeli army and take over a significant part of northern Israel. That's how strong they are. And everything he said there, understand this. Hassan Nasrallah, who's number one in Hezbollah, gave a speech last Friday where he talked about this, how you take the pressure off of Gaza. What he said is because of what we're doing here, which is managed escalation, they're not seeking rapid escalation. They're just creating enough pressure on Israel that Israel has to respond. 70,000 Israeli troops are now on the border that otherwise could be at Gaza. Half of the Israeli Navy is focused on Hezbollah, not on Hamas. A quarter of the Israeli Air Force is focused on Hezbollah, not Hamas. 30,000 Israeli civilians have been evacuated from the settlements and now have to be resettled interior of Israel at significant economic cost. 300,000 Israeli reservists have been pulled from their jobs and are in the military now. Those jobs aren't filled. The Israeli economy is facing a crisis mode. All of this is because of Hezbollah. This is the pressure that Hezbollah is putting on, the diversion of resources away to relieve the pressure on Gaza. And what Hezbollah has said is, we'll do this, and if Israel manages to turn the tide and threaten Hamas with destruction, then we will come in hard. And Israel doesn't have a response to that. They cannot beat Hezbollah in a stand-up fight as things currently stand.
Doesn't Prime Minister Netanyahu have the ability to reason and understand the danger he's bringing Israel into by this unbridled, almost carpet bombing-like invasion of Gaza?
Benjamin Netanyahu is a survivor. Understand this, that if he steps aside in unfavorable conditions, he will be arrested and he will be prosecuted for corruption. He'll spend the rest of his life in jail. So this is a man who's willing to use the suffering of the Palestinian people and the suffering of Israel to further his political ambition. He should be pushed out of power today, but he's holding on, and I believe he's holding on for a deal that says that when he steps aside, there will be a non-prosecution agreement. There will be some sort of agreement that will absolve him of this responsibility. He's fighting for his own personal future and the future of his wife, Sarah.
Is Joe Biden involved in any of this? I mean, Tony Blinken's weekend jaunts around the Middle East was a dismal and publicly embarrassing failure.
Well, I mean, Joe Biden's involved in that. He's the commander in chief. He's the president of the United States. But in this, he has delegated authority to Blinken. Blinken is running the show right now. Blinken is calling the shots. He coordinates with Jake Sullivan to ensure that there's some sort of connectivity with the Department of Defense, Lloyd Austin. The CIA director, William Burns, just went to Israel, by the way, to talk. No one's talking about what he was telling him. I'm sure he's giving him the bad news and such. But, you know, Biden right now is in a very difficult situation because he, you know, from a national security standpoint, of course, we are totally married to Israel, and we will continue to provide Israel with the support necessary for Israel to at least try to dominate the battlefield. But we're coming into an election season, and 2024 is looking very problematic for Joe Biden right now. And one of the things that makes it problematic is that there are a lot of swing states. We'll bring up Michigan to be precise, where there's a large Arab population, and Biden can't afford to lose Michigan. If he loses Michigan, he can't get reelected, or whoever the Democratic National Committee appoints as his proxy can't get reelected. So to appease Michigan, he's going to have to do things that are not, the Israelis don't agree with. There's a political battle. So they're trying to blend the traditional national security support of Israel with the devolving global situation. We are becoming increasingly isolated. That's problematic, with a very problematic internal domestic situation. And, this is an awful lot to ask a man of Biden's age and diminished mental capacity. But his handlers are busy trying to,